Hey, I'm Max and welcome to my devlog for my new game. I decided to stop my RPG game that I was working on for the past few months, and that is because it was simply boring. The core gameplay was simply walking around, finding an enemy, then you face the enemy and you press keys to use spell until it dies. There was no special effect or anything that made it really interesting to play. This time I want to make a game that has very satisfying gameplay, so it will be enjoyable to play no matter the story or graphics or anything like that. I have a good idea planned out and I will share with you my progress. Let's get started. Breaking things is definitely one of the most satisfying things you can do, especially in video games where you don't have to pay or clean up. Unreal Engine has a new way to break in-game items. It is called the chaos system. It works by fracturing a mesh into multiple parts, and then you can fracture those parts into more little parts. You can do that as much as you want, but the more parts you have, the more it will lag, because they are all simulated with physics. Then you set a damage needed to break into big parts, and then more damage to break into the smaller parts, and that damage can be applied using collisions or fields like force fields. I really wanted to have this feature in my game, so I started experimenting with it. I decided a good experiment would be to break down a house, which would be like a classic for the game. With my first attempt, I got a house filled with brick that explodes everywhere and pieces floating in the air. Not very good. Changing a setting stopped the explosion and the pieces floating, but they were still moving around a lot and the house was still filled with bricks, like there was no empty space in the middle. If I set the material inside to invisible, then it removed the brick inside, but it left me with paper thin walls, so I needed to add some thickness. Also, I managed to set up a kill field for the particles, which means that as soon as they get close to the ground, they freeze and stop. It's definitely not perfect, there's some pieces that froze mid-air while falling, but it's better than before. Then I managed to get the roof and the walls to fall separate from each other and also get some thick walls. At this point I was pretty happy with the results, however it does take a lot of CPU, which means that the FPS drop quite a lot. I wish I could do some things to improve that, like make the particles fade out over time, but I just can't. There is no setting in Chaos right now to do that, but it's still pretty new, so they might add some settings later to improve the performance. So I'm going to keep it like that for now, and maybe later I can optimize it more. Next, I started working on the second most satisfying thing in games, and that is shooting guns and ragdolls. I added aiming with a zoom and a crosshair when you hold right click. I turned my character into a monster apparently by adding some torso rotation based on where you look, but then I got it working. And then I adjusted the gun's power so it makes sense to not break too much things, because if you shoot a bullet and it breaks a whole house, that's kinda weird. Next I had to fix a pretty big aiming bug. Since you shoot from the camera, because I want to shoot at the center of the screen, because that's the way you aim in the game, you can shoot somewhere the camera can see but the player cannot, and that's kinda weird. I fixed this by first checking where the camera was looking to find out where you want to shoot, and then shooting from the player's gun to that point where you're aiming, and then if there's something in between, then the bullet is going to hit that. Now it is time to add the third most satisfying thing in games, and that is spells and superpowers. The classic game spell is a fireball, so I went with that first, but there will be more. I also added a different aiming animation for fireballs, because you usually don't shoot fireballs with a gun. The fireballs are very powerful and make things break and explode, which feels very good. I literally spent minutes testing each thing, even though it took seconds to test, just because breaking those houses was so much fun. I also attempted to make an enemy AI so that after seeing you, he runs towards you and fires at you. Let's just say that my first attempt at the AI was not very intelligent, but I eventually got it working. When you fire at him, he falls to the ground and kind of glitches halfway through the ground. So clearly I still had some work left to do. It took me a bit of time, but I managed to fix everything, so the AI now is pretty good. Once it sees you or you attack it, it will start running towards you. Once it is at a decent range, it will start shooting. If you move away, it will move to get back in range and inside of you. And I also added a bullet trail to give some more effects to the shooting so you know better when you're getting shot at. At this point you would think that I'm done adding more things, right? Well, you would be wrong. What is the fourth most satisfying thing in games? That's right, it's driving cars. It was surprisingly easy to add realistic driving physics with the new chaos system. I got it working on the first try. Okay, no, maybe not, but on the second try for real. The physics are really realistic and the car can be used to break things. It will also bounce on pieces on the ground, launch in the air, turn around, drift, everything you can expect from a real car. There we go, I think I'm on the right track to making a very satisfying game to play with. I think having cars, destruction, guns and spells all in one game might seem kind of strange to some people, but I'm sure it can give a pretty good game. I already enjoy playing this game a lot more than my previous one, so that's a good sign. Hopefully this game will actually turn out good in the end. If you're interested in seeing more about this game, consider subscribing. It will also help me and motivate me a lot. Thanks, and hopefully I'll see you again later.